Hey, you guys. My name is Jasmine. I also go by Proud Mom and I also go by the Empress here on YouTube. This is my daily Bible study with you guys. We're not going to go over any verses in particular, but I'm telling stories from the Bible, okay? I'm also a mom. If you do hear children in the background, if it gets too out of hand or I get overstimulated, I will pause this recording and come back and finish it later. I do have every intention on finishing the whole book of Exodus today, okay? Some people don't have the time or physical Bibles, or there's just too many options for them to read and then try to understand the stories in the Bible, so I'm just reading those stories to simplify the synopsis. So this is Exodus 1 through 2. Moses and the bulrushes. In Egypt, a new Pharaoh came to the throne. Since Joseph's time, the children of Israel had grown powerful and numerous, and the new king was frightened that they will overrun his country. We must take precautions against them, he said to his counselors. If war breaks out, they may side with our enemies and defeat us. First, he gave orders that the Israelites should be treated as slaves and made to work in gangs, building roads and cities. Then he made a ruling that any male child born to an Israelite woman should immediately be put to death. Now there was a young married woman of the tribe of Levi who had recently given birth to a boy. Both parents were delighted, and they made up their minds that their son should escape Pharaoh's cruel command. For the first 3 months of the baby's life, his mother managed to hide him in the house. But soon he grew too big to hide, and she knew that she could no longer keep him. With a heavy heart, she made a covered cradle out of dried reeds, which she made watertight by covering it with tar and clay. In this, she tenderly placed her baby and left him hidden among the bulrushes on the banks of the Nile. All this was watched by the baby's sister, who remained near at hand so that she could see what would happen. It was not long before Pharaoh's daughter, accompanied by her maids, came down to the river to bathe. Catching sight of the little cradle, she sent one of the girls to bring it to her. As the princess gently removed the cover, the baby began to cry, and her heart was touched. "This must be a Hebrew child," she said. At that moment, the baby's sister came forward and, courtesying low to the princess, asked if she could be of help. "Shall I find a nurse from among the Hebrew women to look after the baby?" she said. The princess was delighted with the suggestion, and the girl ran quickly home to fetch her mother. The princess was happy to employ the woman. "If you will look after the boy," she said, "I will pay you well." So the baby's real mother was able to bring him up. In time, Pharaoh's daughter, who had grown to love the child, adopted him as her son. "I will call him Moses," which means to draw out. She said, "It's because I drew him out of the water." They used to make fans from ostrich feathers in those days. They were known as fan barriers in the Egyptian royal court. Ostriches were common to be seen around that time. Moses is called by God, Exodus 2 through 4. Although brought up as an Egyptian, Moses never forgot that he was one of the children of Israel. One day he saw an Egyptian savagely beating an Israelite slave. Looking around to see that no one was watching, he killed the attacker and buried his body in the sand. However, word of what he had done eventually came to Pharaoh's ears, and Moses knew that his life was in danger. He left Egypt and went to the land of Midian. Presently, he sat down to rest near a well. The 7 daughters of Jethro, a priest in Midian, came to the well to draw water, but the local shepherds drove them away. Moses rebuked the men, then helped the young women to fill their jars. When they told their father what had happened, Jethro was so grateful that he gave Moses his daughter Zipporah in marriage. One day, while tending Jethro's sheep, Moses led them far into the desert to the holy mountain of Sinai. The flock was quietly grazing when suddenly the Lord appeared from the middle of a bush that had burst into flames. But as Moses looked at the flames licking and crackling among the leaves, he saw that the blazing bush was not being destroyed by the fire. Then Moses heard the voice of God calling him, "Moses, do not come any nearer, for you are standing on holy ground." At this, Moses put his hands over his eyes, for he was afraid to look at God. "I have seen how my people are suffering in Egypt, where they are treated as slaves," said the Lord. "I will free them from that cruel country and give them a land of their own, a land flowing with milk and honey. You, Moses, must go and bring my people out of Egypt." "But how am I to do this?" asked Moses. "I will be with you," said the Lord. "You must tell the Israelites that I am the God of their ancestors, the God of Abraham and Isaac, and they will follow you. Tell them that God, whose name is that I am, has sent you. You must go to Pharaoh and ask him in my name to release the Israelites. He will be angry and refuse your request. But I will curse Egypt and cause such horrors to fall upon the land that Pharaoh will no longer defy me, and he will let you go." "But what if they do not believe that I am sent by God?" "Moses, what are you holding in your hand?" "A staff," said Moses. "Throw it to the ground." And Moses threw down his staff, which instantly became a serpent writhing in the dust. "Now lift it up by the tail." As Moses picked up the snake, it turned back into a wooden staff. "Now look at your hand," God commanded him. And Moses saw with horror that his hand was covered with running sores. "Look again." And Moses looked, and his hand was smooth. "But Lord, I am slow of speech," said Moses. "Then your brother Aaron shall speak for you. Now go, do as I have told you, and I will be with you," said God. Exodus 4-7, Moses warns the Pharaoh. After God had spoken to him, Moses returned home. God had told Moses that the men who wanted to kill him were now dead, and it would be safe for him to go back to Egypt. Moses told his father-in-law of his plan and asked for his blessing. "Go in peace," said Jethro fondly. So Moses left Midian, taking with him the staff of God, and accompanied by his wife, his sons, and his brother Aaron, he came once more to Egypt. He and Aaron went at once to see Pharaoh. "I have come at the command of the God of Israel to ask you to let his people go," said Moses. Pharaoh smiled coldly. "Why do you stir up trouble among my slaves? I will teach you what it means to defy me." And he gave order that the Israelites, who had been put to make bricks out of mud and straw, should no longer have straw provided. They must find it for themselves in the fields. The Israelites, already worked to exhaustion by their masters, were in despair. "How can we make bricks if we must also gather the straw?" they cried. But their cries were ignored, and those who failed to make as many bricks as before were savagely beaten. "Look at your people, Lord," said Moses. "They are being treated even more harshly, and there is no hope of release." "Speak again to Pharaoh," said God, "and demand that he let my people go." So the brothers stood a second time before Pharaoh in his court, only to receive the same answer. But Moses, remembering what God had told him, signaled to Aaron to throw down the staff. Aaron did so, and as the staff touched the ground, it turned into a serpent. At this, Pharaoh gave the order to his royal magicians, and they all threw down their staffs, which all turned into serpents. These were swallowed up by Aaron's serpent. But Pharaoh remained unmoved. "Go to the banks of the Nile," said the Lord to Moses, "and when Pharaoh comes down to the river, ask him again to let my people go. And if he will not, strike the surface of the water with your staff." And so Moses and Aaron went down to the river and waited for Pharaoh to come. Exodus 7-10, the plagues of Egypt. Once more, Moses and Aaron pleaded with Pharaoh to let the people go. When Pharaoh refused to listen, they struck the waters of the river Nile. At once the water turned to blood, and all the fish died, and the dead fish rotted in the sun and stank. For 7 days the whole of Egypt ran with blood, and there was no water to drink. But Pharaoh refused to free the Israelites. So Moses and Aaron, following God's command, stretched their sacred staff over the Nile. At once throughout all Egypt, frogs in their hundreds and thousands came hopping out of rivers, streams, and ponds, hopping into people's houses, into their cupboards and ovens, even into their beds. Horrified, Pharaoh sent for Moses. "Ask your God to take away this plague," he implored, "and I will let your people go at once." Overnight, the frogs died. They lay several deep in the villages and fields until they were gathered up into evil-smelling heaps. And when Pharaoh saw that the plague was over, he went back on his word. Then Aaron struck the sand beneath his feet, and the millions of grains of sand turned into millions of lice that crawled and seethed over every man, woman, and beast that lived in the land. But Pharaoh's heart was like stone. Next came a cloud of flies, fat black flies that crawled into people's mouths and under their eyelids. Again, Pharaoh begged Moses in return for the Israelites' freedom to rid him of the plague. And when the flies were gone, again he broke his word. This time the Lord sent to Egypt disease that killed every horse and camel, all the oxen, the goats, and the sheep, every one. But still Pharaoh would not let the children of Israel leave. God said to Moses and Aaron, "Take a handful of ashes from the fire and throw it up into the air." And as they did this, the ashes spread a hideous sickness that broke out in boils, covering the skin of both men and animals. But Pharaoh was not moved. Then God told Moses to stretch his hand toward the heavens, and instantly there was a crash of thunder. Red-hot lightning zigzagged along the ground, and a heavy hail fell from the sky, flattening whole fields and smashing open the trunks of trees. Pharaoh summoned Moses. "Now I will do as you asked if you will stop the storm." So Moses spoke to the Lord, and the hail and thunder stopped. But the children of Israel were not released. That same day, an east wind began to blow. It blew all day and all night, and with the wind came the locusts. They came in such numbers that the sky was black, and they covered the land so that the land was black. And they ate every remaining blade of grass, every leaf, every fruit left hanging from the tree. When Pharaoh repented, God turned the wind, and the locusts were blown into the Red Sea. But God's people were kept captive still. So God told Moses to stretch out his hand, and darkness fell upon Egypt, and there was no light for 3 days. Pharaoh sent for Moses. "Now you may go, you and all your people, but you must leave your flocks behind." "That I may not do," said Moses. "Then I shall keep your people as slaves, and I forbid you ever to come into my presence again. If you disobey me in this, you will die." Exodus 11 through 12. The 10th plague. The Lord spoke to Moses. "I shall bring one last plague to Egypt, a plague so terrible that Pharaoh will have no choice but to let my people go. At midnight tonight, every firstborn child throughout the country will die. Not one shall escape. All will die, from the firstborn of Pharaoh himself to the firstborn of the poorest slave to the firstborn of the cattle in the fields. Only the children of Israel will remain untouched. This day shall forever afterward be known as Passover. For tonight I will pass over the whole of Egypt, and my people will be freed. From now on, the day must be kept holy and counted as the first day of the year. Every household must kill a lamb, which shall then be roasted and eaten with bitter herbs and bread that is unleavened. Your doorposts must be daubed with the blood of the slain animals, so that when I pass in the night, I shall know to leave untouched the houses marked with blood." Moses called together all his wise men and counselors and told them what God had said and how they were to keep this day, the first Passover, holy forever after. Midnight fell, and suddenly a terrible wailing and screaming was heard as the Lord passed over the land. Except for the Israelites, not one family was left unharmed. Death was everywhere. Everywhere from Pharaoh's place to the... Everywhere from Pharaoh's palace to the darkest prison, from the rich merchant's house to the open pastern, the firstborn, both man and beast, drew their last breaths and died. So Pharaoh, raising from his bed in grief, sent for Moses and Aaron. "Take your people and go. Go from my country and take all your flocks and herds." By now, the Egyptians were so frightened they begged the Israelites to leave as quickly as possible and heap their former slaves with silver, gold, and jewels. So it was that after 430 years in the land of their captivity, the children of Israel, 600,000 of them, all on foot, men, women, and children, with their flocks and herds and all their possessions, at last left Egypt. Hmm. Exodus 13, 14, and 15. The crossing of the Red Sea. God led his people out of Egypt and through the wilderness at the edge of the Red Sea. God led them by day as a column of cloud and by night as a column of fire, so they should know which way to go. But Pharaoh again hardened his heart, angry that he had let his slaves leave. He gave orders to the officers of his army to make ready, and he himself led a force of 600 chariots, as well as horsemen and foot soldiers against the Israelites. The Israelites were camped on the shore when they saw the Egyptian army approaching. They turned in terror to Moses. Why did you take us from our comfortable captivity only to let us die here in the wilderness? Do not be afraid, Moses reassured them. The Lord will protect you from harm. As he spoke, the column of cloud moved over the Egyptians so that they were in darkness. Then, following the word of the Lord, Moses stretched his hand over the sea. Immediately, a strong wind sprang up and the waters parted, and a passage of dry land appeared the seabed. A passage of dry land appeared along the seabed. So Moses led his people along this path, and the waters, like a high wall, was on either side of them. As soon as Pharaoh saw what was happening, he and his army came galloping in pursuit. But as his horsemen and his hundreds of chariots thundered over the dry sand, the Lord commanded Moses again to stretch out his hand. The waters of the Red Sea closed over the Egyptians, and every man was drowned. But the children of Israel reached the far side of the sea in safety. And when they saw how God had protected them, they gave grateful thanks to God and to the prophet Moses. They sang a song of praise, recalling the happy escape of the children of Israel from their long years of slavery and their crossing of the Red Sea. Then Miriam, Aaron's sister, took up her tambourine and, calling the women to follow her, led them in a dance along the water's edge. If you haven't seen the movie, what's it called? The Prince of Egypt. That's basically the book of Exodus. The Prince of Egypt, that movie. Exodus 16 through 17. God watches over the Israelites. The Israelites wandered in the Sinai desert for many weeks, hungry and exhausted. They began to whisper against Moses and Aaron. At least in Egypt we had plenty to eat, but here we may die of starvation. The Lord heard what they were saying and told Moses to summon his people. They shall be well provided with food, God promised. That same evening, flocks of quails suddenly appeared, which were caught and roasted. The next morning, the ground was covered with small round shapes, white and tasting of honey. The Israelites were puzzled. What is this? They asked each other. It must be manna, for it falls from heaven. This is bread sent by God, said Moses. Let the people gather as much as they can eat in a day and no more. But some were greedy and took more than their share. Secretly, they hoarded the manna in their tents, and overnight it turned black and became full of worms and stank. On the sixth day, Moses told them that they could collect enough food to last for 2 days. Tomorrow is a holy day of rest as decreed by God. Today you must gather up what you need and eat as much as you want and keep the rest for the Sabbath. It will stay fresh and good overnight, for tomorrow you will find no manna on the ground. Most people did as Moses said, but a few disobeyed and went out on the Sabbath looking for food. When will the people learn to obey my rules? The Lord asked Moses. The days passed, and the Israelites, as they made their slow way through the burning desert, complained of lack of water. Why did you bring us out of Egypt just to die of thirst? They asked angrily. But God told Moses to go to a certain rock and strike it with his staff. As he did so, water cold and pure gushed out of the rock so that all could drink their fill. Exodus 19 through 20. Moses receives God's laws. After 3 months, the children of Israel arrived at the foot of the holy mountain of Sinai, where they made their camp. Sinai, where they made their camp. Moses went up the mountain to pray to God, who told him that in 3 days God would speak to the people. On the morning of the 3rd day, the sky turned black, and thunder and lightning crashed and rumbled through the darkness. The mountain itself belched smoke and fire like a great furnace, and the ground shook. Then the voice of God was heard like a mighty trumpet, calling Moses to him. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt, and these are my commandments to be obeyed by all my people. You shall worship no other God than me. You shall not make any statue or picture to worship. You shall not speak the name of the Lord except with reverence. You shall keep the Sabbath, the 7th day, as a holy day of rest. For in 6 days I made the world, but on the 7th day I rested. You shall show respect to your father and mother. You shall not commit murder. You shall not be unfaithful to your husband or wife. You shall not steal. You shall not speak falsely against others, and you shall not envy another person's possessions. When the people heard the thunder and saw the flames and the smoke, they were terrified and would not come near. But Moses reassured them. Do not be afraid, he said. God has come to us so that we may learn his commandments and keep ourselves free of sin. But still the people shrank back, and again Moses went up the mountain alone to the dark cloud on the summit where God was. Exodus 32, the golden calf. When the people saw that Moses had not returned from the mountain, they gathered around Aaron, saying, You must make us a god, for we do not know what has happened to this Moses who brought us out of Egypt. Then bring me gold, said Aaron, and I will give you what you want. So both men and women brought Aaron their gold jewelry, which he melted down and formed into the shape of a monstrous golden calf. He built an altar to the calf, and the people prayed to it and offered sacrifices and danced and feasted in front of it. Now, if they made time to do that, why they just didn't walk up there with... Looking down from his mountaintop, God said to Moses, How quickly are my commandments forgotten? Now shall the full force of my anger be felt. But Moses begged the Lord to forgive them. Did you bring them out of Egypt, your chosen people, only to destroy them in your fury? Calmed by these words, God sent Moses down the mountain carrying 2 stone tablets on which were engraved his 10 commandments. As he came near the Israelites' camp, Moses heard loud laughter and music. He saw the statue of the calf and the smoking sacrificial fires and drunken figures wildly dancing. Full of anger, he flung the stone tablets to the ground where they broke into pieces. He knocked over the golden idol and threw it on the flames. Then he turned to Aaron. How could you have let this happen? He demanded. Summoning the people together at the entrance of the camp, Moses solemnly addressed them. Let those who are on the side of the Lord come and stand by me. Only the men of the tribe of Levi went to him, the rest remaining where they were. Now, he said to the Levites, go through the camp and with your swords put to death every man you see, for this is the will of God. Hi, Contoro. With everything. Over 3,000 men were killed that night, and the next day Moses went again to the Lord to beg forgiveness for his repentant people. I will send an angel to lead them to the promised land, said God, but they have made a false idol and must suffer for it. So that was the end of Exodus. The next book of the Bible is Numbers. Sure, thanks for liking the live, Contoro. The next book in the Bible is Numbers. If you own a Bible, Numbers has stories, and I don't think those are called songs, but I'll have to go like open a Bible, and then I can tell you more of what I'm trying to say. I'm reading stories of the Bible, trying to anyway, in the order that the Bibles are received, and the books in the order that the books of the Bible are received. I'm only in the Old Testament right now. We almost to the New Testament though. That's what I'm doing. No, I'm not Catholic, but I got a rosary tattooed on my body. I recite some Marys from time and then. Numbers 22 through 24. Balaam's donkey. Balak, king of the Moabites, looked with fear on the tribes of Israel who were surrendering his land. He sent messages to the fortune teller Balaam, asking him to curse his people so that he might defeat them in battle. But God had spoken to Balaam. "You must not curse the people of Israel," he said, "for they are my chosen people." When Balak's messengers arrived, Balaam told them he would not do as they wished. "If Balak were to give me his own house, every room heaped with gold and silver, still I cannot go against the word of God," said Balaam. But that night God spoke again to Balaam. "Go with these men and do just as I tell you." The next day Balaam saddled his donkey and set off with Balak's messengers. Why you asking for my location? ¿Cómo no? ¿Por qué you want to quieres to know saber? ¿Por qué tú quieres saber? Estás en Estados Unidos. Okay. Suddenly the angel of the Lord appeared, blocking the way, drawing sword in his hand. The donkey saw the angel and shied away, turning off the road and into a field. But Balaam saw nothing, and he beat his mount angrily. Next, the angel barred a path that led through a vineyard between high walls. Again, the donkey saw him and squeezed up against the wall, crushing Balaam's foot, and again she was beaten. The angel appeared a third time, standing in the middle of a narrow path where there was no room to turn either to the left or the right. When the donkey saw the angel, she lay down on the ground. Balaam was angrier than ever and beat her twice as hard. Then God gave the animal the power of speech. "Why do you hit me?" she asked. "Because you disobeyed me," her master furiously replied. "If I had a sword, I would kill you." Then the Lord opened Balaam's eyes, and he saw the angel. Appalled and astonished, he fell flat on his face, begging for forgiveness. Balak greeted Balaam and took him into the mountains. Balaam then went still higher up to the mountain where God spoke to him, telling him to bless the Israelites. Balaam looked down across the wild wilderness and saw the tribes of Israel in their tents, and he blessed them. This made Balak very angry. "I called on you to curse my enemies. Instead, you blessed them? I promised you great riches if you would obey me. But now you must go away empty-handed." So Balaam returned to his home in Pethor by the river Euphrates. Life in Canaan. The Bible tells us, I don't know. Why doesn't anyone support me much? Why I don't have subscribers? I don't know. No sé. The Bible tells us that when the Hebrew people escaped from Egypt, they settled in Canaan, the promised land. Canaan. Eventually, the land they conquered was divided among the 12 tribes who were the descendants of Jacob, later called Israel. For this reason, they were also known as the Israelites. In the valley of the river Jordan, in the east of the country and on the coastal plain in the west, there were many kinds of crops and fruits. Compared to the barren land, though, which the Israelites had traveled through for 40 years, Canaan was a land flowing with milk and honey. The Israelites were experienced in tending their flocks and living simply off the land, But there they found workers skilled in many other crafts and trades. In addition to the farmers, there were stone masons, potters, builders, metal workers, jewelers, carpenters, and musicians. The Canaanites worshipped many gods and goddesses, including one called Ba. At Ugarit, which is now Ras Sharma in Syria, a statue of Ba was found showing him as a warrior god. The religion of the Israelites were very different. They worshipped only one God and did not have any statues or carved images. These religious differences led to clashes between the Israelites and the followers of Baal. The 12 tribes of Israel. So according to the Bible, the 12 tribes of Israel were descended from the 12 sons of Jacob. No tribe was named after Joseph, Jacob's best-known son, but two tribes, Manasseh and Ephraim, took their names from Joseph's sons. Each of the 12 tribes Each of the 12 tribes had its own identity, and each was given territory when Canaan was conquered. The Levites, who were named after Levi, had no territory because they were responsible for organizing and carrying out the worship of God in the tabernacle, the sacred meeting tent. Excuse me. Judges and kings. To begin with, the Israelites did not have a king. They were linked by the law of God given to them by Moses and by their understanding and worship of God. Moses appointed judges to make sure that the people lived according to God's laws. Later, these judges became leaders of the people. The Bible tells us that when they were being attacked by their chief enemy, the Philistines, the Israelites decided that they wanted a central government to be ruled by a king. Bye. As a result, Saul became the first king of Israel. He was succeeded by his son-in-law David and David's son Solomon. Later, the kingdom was divided into two. Israel in the north, ruled by a series of kings beginning with Jeroboam, and Judah in the south, ruled by Solomon's descendants, beginning with his son Rehoboam. Jeroboam and Rehoboam. Israel was destroyed by the Assyrians after 200 years, but Judah, from which the word Jew comes, lasted for another 135 years before Jerusalem was destroyed by the Babylonians and the people taken to live in exile in Babylon. Interesting. Next in this book is Numbers 13 and Deuteronomy 31 through 34. It's the story of the Promised Land. I'm not going to read that right now, though, because I've gotten hungry. So I'll be back to read the story of the Promised Land. Hold on, let me see. What else? I wasn't trying to have y'all all in my business like that. Let's see. That the Promised Land ain't long. Some tea comes up a little bit. Yeah, pretty much. I see. Okay. Okay, I'll be back to follow up with you guys with more stories from the Bible.